Good morning and welcome to AM Prime. I am Nikolai Edwards. Now, if you would have looked on to the press conference that took place yesterday coming out of the office of the Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley would have hosted the Director General of the World Health Organization. Now, I do think that this is a big deal because this is the individual who really was the face on behalf of the United Nations when it came to the global response to COVID-19. And for such an individual to be in Trinidad and Tobago, and especially to be singing praises to an extent of Trinidad and Tobago's response to COVID-19, I think that is very significant and worth noting. So I looked on at the press conference yesterday, and one of the things that stood out to me was the fact that he said, Dr. Tedros, that is, that he mentioned there has not been a conclusion as to what exactly was the result, what was the cause rather, of the COVID-19 virus. And with all of the science that we have available to us, the information, the knowledge, the data, we still have not, as a globe, been able to come to a conclusion. We have a number of theories that are available that it would have been because of a lab outbreak, an accident taking place there. We heard that it would have been as a result of humans eating animals that would have carried a particular disease, and so on. But it leaves that question lingering of how are we as a global community really harnessing and depending and pushing the use of data and information, especially in decision making and planning ahead. So we look on still at the World Health Organization for that conclusion because it will be important in detecting or even preventing or lessening the impacts of a future pandemic. So this is the kind of information even Trinidad and Tobago, as we would have pursued a particular path in treating with the pandemic domestically. There may be some best practices there, but the important thing is to document it as much as possible and make that information available to the international community. Those things play a very important role in our sustainable development and really charting a way ahead, not just for our country and our region, but the globe as a whole. So very interesting information, as well as other things coming out of that press conference. At this point, folks, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we have a top economist to help us unpack some of the information that we've gotten in recent days relative to the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, relative to our gratitude that we should be having for the oil and gas and the industry and how it has played a role in our development. But that and much more when we return. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Kenny Sports Center is having a Grandfather's Day sale. From now until Sunday 18th June, get an amazing 20% off everything. You heard right, 20% off everything in store. Get all your top brands like Adidas, New Balance, Kinetic, and a lot more. Visit any of our branches today: Port of Spain, West Mall, Long Circular Mall, Trinity Mall, and Carlton Center San Fernando for this amazing 20% off sale. Happy Father's Day from Kenny Sports Center, where dads are appreciated.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing on it.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Paul?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the right and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinidadians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
The best laptops and tablets are at dbesttoys.com. Get a Gateway 14.1-inch Ultra Slim notebook or an HP 14-inch laptop at the best prices in TNT. Get the Fire 7 tablet for $474. You can also shop the latest Amazon Fire Sticks. Call now at 32-DBEST to order or visit us in-store at Forces flagship Mac Bean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Free delivery available throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Cash or links on delivery.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
Welcome back to AM Prime. I'm Nikolai Edwards. Now we jump into that discussion that I was mentioning before as it relates to the economy and a number of topics, hopefully, that we can get through in the next couple of minutes. Now, joining me via Zoom is Dr. Marlene Atz, and she is a development economist and consultant. Dr. Atz, good morning and welcome to AM Prime.
Good morning, Nikolai. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
Nice. So I really appreciate you joining me to help me unpack some of the things that we've learned in recent days. And one of the things, jumping right into it, had to do with what took place at the BBC World Questions Forum at the Central Bank Auditorium. Now, you would have been one of the panelists on that discussion, but also on stage would have been the Minister of Energy and Energy Affairs, Stuart Young. And when posed with the question as to what are we doing to really ensure a sustainable future for Trinidad and Tobago because of the strong reliance on oil and gas, but diversification really was that effort that people were hoping we would have gotten to a more significant point at this stage in Trinidad and Tobago's development. But the Minister of Energy and Energy Affairs said that we have to be grateful for the oil and gas and what that sector has provided to this country. It was met with some different comments, but jumping into that, what were your initial thoughts, not just on what the minister was saying, but essentially this dependence that we have on oil and gas and trying to balance that with a sustainable future?
All right, thanks for the question, Nikolai. Lots of layers to that question and lots of layers to the response. Yeah. So if you'll permit me just to essentially kind of take us a little bit down history so that we can apply some context. Sure. I think the minister's comment, of course, since he is in fact the Minister of Energy and all matters related to energy in Trinidad and Tobago, there was no surprise there that he would say that. I mean, he did make some qualification on his comment, you know, when there was a sense that the audience at the central bank did not agree with him. Mm-hmm. But just to put some context, so since independence, so let's take it to the 1970s, Trinidad and Tobago enjoyed windfalls in terms of our government's revenues coming from the exportation of crude oil. You know, when the prices skyrocketed in the 1970s, we benefited significantly. And that windfall essentially has been the foundation of the economic prosperity that Trinidad and Tobago has seen. So the development of things like our Point Lisas industrial estates, several of the developments we've seen, the fact that we have fairly good education, healthcare systems. I mean, we can discuss how those things have been unpacked over the decades, mm-hmm. and whether or not we've seen the kind of development trajectory that we would like to see in some specific areas. But I think that foundation from the 1970s, then there was the sharp decline in energy prices in the 1980s, which led to us going into a structural adjustment program with the International Monetary Fund. And then into the 1990s, the 2000s, the current century in which we find ourselves. And essentially, there has been some volatility in terms of the energy sector. Now, while the energy sector, oil and gas, has brought a lot of prosperity to Trinidad and Tobago, it has also brought a lot of volatility in terms of government's revenues. So in 2008, there was a global financial crisis, which led to a significant decline in energy prices. And of course, since then, Trinidad and Tobago's economy has been waxing and waning in terms of government's revenues, essentially as a result of what has been happening externally to the price of oil and gas. Price of oil and gas, really the foundation of Trinidad's economic pillar. Now, all of that to say is that it's understandable that Minister Young would essentially use the opportunity to sing the praises of the hydrocarbon sector because it has been significant. Trinidad and Tobago enjoys on the Human Development Index, which is a global measure of how countries are doing on the development trajectory. Trinidad and Tobago enjoys the rank of about 0.8. The highest is 1. Trinidad and Tobago is 0.8 in terms of our index, and that I think equates to high human development. Now, we can have a conversation about the data that they use to arrive at that, and whether or not we think it actually reflects, correctly reflects what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago. But I think the first point I want to make is, yes, the oil and gas sector has been the platform on which Trinidad and Tobago has built its economy. So we ought to be grateful, but there is, of course, a flip side to that. And, there's something in the economics literature, political economy literature, particularly looking at economies that are heavily dependent on natural resources, where we talk about the resource curse and the Dutch disease, meaning essentially that countries that are so heavily dependent on these natural resources. Now, remember with the natural resources, you simply extract a barrel of oil or you extract gas and you earn revenue. And very often the extraction is done by multinational companies, and depending on the price of the oil or depending on the price of the gas, you earn a significant, the country where the natural resources being extracted earns an awful lot of money. And that is what has happened to Trinidad and Tobago. And the resource curse and the Dutch disease tells us that in those kinds of economies, you run the risk of being so heavily dependent on that natural resource that you don't focus on economic diversification and you don't focus on other sectors to essentially balance off what will inevitably happen when your resource, your supply of those natural resources eventually declines. Yes. And that is essentially what has happened, or what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago. We're in the state now where we have insufficient gas to supply our downstream industries, and that is causing some concern in terms of government's revenues. We're in the space now where oil and gas prices are not as robust as they were in the 1970s or even decades thereafter, and we are facing that. So while Minister Young was accurate in saying that we should be grateful, I think there is a flip side to that which we, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, need to be aware of, and to essentially divorce ourselves from the politics of the day and the politics of the economy, and understand what is happening in our economic space. So yes, it has been a blessing, but I think there also have been opportunities for us, missed opportunities for us to diversify the economy for that day, for that time, for that period when we no longer enjoy the revenues from the oil and gas sector.
Now, one of the things I was recently paying some attention to Norway, which has a population of about 5.5 million, and they produce on average just over 2 million barrels of oil per day. And when you compare what they've been able to do in Norway to Trinidad and Tobago insofar as using the revenue that they would have received from the oil and gas sector and putting that aggressively into sustainable development. So they have really put some benchmarks that they are far ahead of in respect of public transportation, going electric, all federal vehicles and so on. But what it showed me, if anything, was that there existed the political will to enact those kinds of changes. In Trinidad and Tobago, I think that we are ripe for those kinds of investments and opportunities. But one keeps questioning whether or not Trinidad and Tobago is on a path to diversification. Now, as an economist, and looking on at what the government has been able to do over the past couple of years, where would you say we are along that path to development and diversification specifically?
Well, I think we're not as advanced. Certainly we can't compare ourselves to Norway. In fact, considering the Human Development Index to which I referred a little while ago, I think Norway might be ranked number 1 or certainly the top 5 in that Human Development Index, because you are correct. On all indicators, and the Human Development Index looks at issues such as education, health issues, and per capita income. And there would be some other considerations inside of there in terms of issues like how you treat the environment, et cetera, et cetera. I think we're not as advanced as we could have been. And while we may wish to focus on the politics of the day and in terms of whether or not governments, successive governments have in fact been committed to economic diversification in Trinidad and Tobago, I think the conversation, there is an opportunity for us to expand that conversation, because I am firmly of the view that politicians are in fact servants of the people, and they are in fact required to act in the best interest of the people, but the people need to understand the dynamics of the economic space, of the social space, and the people need to have a very clear sense, we the people need to have a very clear sense of what we would wish to have our politicians do on our behalf. And I think that's the first thing, that generally the population of Trinidad and Tobago may not be as educated, and I don't mean certified, may not be as okura with the social and economic issues that impact on Trinidad and Tobago, and may not be as okura with how our heavy dependence on the oil and gas sector cannot be sustained, and the need for us to have economic diversification. And economic diversification really has to have a kind of ecosystem approach. What are the enabling environments that are required for Trinidad and Tobago to successfully diversify our economy? And an important part of that is, of course, our education system.
Yes.
And you know, so we move into issues. I think you keep talking about sustainable development. You keep mentioning that, and there are things called the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, to which several governments around the world, including the government of Trinidad and Tobago, are signatories, and we're meant to deliver some deliverables by 2030.
Yes.
And you know, if you were to ask a fundamental question, to what extent are the SDGs part and parcel of our education system, so that as a collective, we are working towards, in small ways, so at the primary school level, the conversations around renewable energy, conversations around what could be done to reduce your carbon footprint as an individual, you know, at the primary school level, at the secondary school level, at the tertiary level, and then essentially building from the ground up to the political level, where, you know, the responsibility lies for a national response to the SDGs. And to me, conversations around economic diversification and what I would also like to include in that, a conversation around structural adjustment. And I don't mean structural adjustment in the way in which it was implemented in the 1980s under the IMF's structural adjustment program, but structurally reshaping our economic system so that we recognize that a dependence on the energy sector is not sustainable, and that we have to prepare for a future where our oil and gas fortunes may not be as robust as they have been in the past. And I think those conversations should have started some time ago, but I think certainly now, where the population, I think, has a greater sense of our vulnerability to what is happening in the global energy market, I think now is the time for us to really kind of take a deep dive to leveraging the global economic circumstances to help our population understand what is happening, and then take us, you know, kind of insist on the government or the political directorate of the day taking us in a direction that could lead us to a more sustainable future.
Now, one of the tools I think that is put in place to help would be the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, because when this country experiences a surplus in our income versus revenue, we see a deposit being made to the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. The purpose that most of us who know about the fund, who pay attention, who are educated, and that speaks to the education that you're mentioning, because the average citizen, young people, many people are not as accurate about this kind of information about the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. But one of the things that we learned recently is when it comes to withdrawals and so forth, the fund actually is currently at the same level when the government came into office back in 2015. But it took a newspaper article coming out, the Minister of Finance becoming irate about that newspaper article, and then we saw coming out of the ministry about 16 points relative to the Heritage and Stabilization Fund that on a normal basis, it does not seem as though there is enough effort or energy being put into educating the population. What do you make of that entire ecosystem or lack thereof when it comes to putting out that kind of pertinent information to the population?
Well, I have to say I'm extremely happy that the media house published what they published last Sunday, and that the Minister of Finance became so irate that the population was able to get a 16-point fact sheet on the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. I mean, the minister in his response said that the documentation had been laid, the annual report for the Heritage and Stabilization Fund had been laid in Parliament, but as we know, as good Trinbagonians, we don't necessarily pay attention to documents that are laid in Parliament. But seriously speaking, I think that as part of transparency and accountability, I think what came out as a response to the media article, I think, should now become par for the course for the population. I think the Sunday newspapers, I think it would make for nice Sunday reading if every year or twice a year some kind of report is published in the Sunday newspapers and published across all media platforms so that the population gets a clear snippet of what is happening to our fund. It is called formally the Heritage and Civilization Fund, but it's really the fund of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, managed by the government of the day under the direction of a board that oversees functioning and the investment portfolio for the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. And as you had mentioned, Norway some time ago. Countries like Norway, Saudi Arabia, all of the countries that have their economic fortunes pegged on natural resources, there is something called a sovereign wealth fund. That's the broad framework within which these funds are in fact established, and ours in Trinidad and Tobago is called the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. And yes, you're correct. It is meant to be, I mean, the thing about our fund, which is, it's a little sticking point for some of us who look at these issues, is that we have it for both heritage and stabilization. So the heritage part of it means that we're leaving something for future generations. So that is the sustainable development aspect of it. But the stabilization part of it means that we can dip into the fund, the government of the day can dip into the fund if they are experiencing significant fiscal deficits. So there are shortfalls in terms of their revenue projections as opposed to their expenditures. They can actually go into the heritage. The legislation for the Heritage and Stabilization Fund allows for the government to draw down funds. So there was drawdown during the COVID-19 pandemic. That unforeseen crisis of significant proportions, the government dipped into the Heritage and Stabilization Fund to provide social relief and to help finance, resources for the health sector, because that was a crisis. I mean, we understood that was a crisis. But there have been those of us suggesting, and I was part of the Economic Development Advisory Board, which the government of the day established back in 2015, 2016. And one of the first things that we did was present a position paper suggesting that there be a separation of the heritage as opposed to the stabilization parts of it, so that in terms of the heritage part of the fund, we don't touch that. We leave something for future generations. And the stabilization is kept as a kind of separate fund to allow the government to access it as and when it may be required, particularly under situations of economic crisis, quote unquote.
Now, I want to get one last question in, at least before I leave you, and it has to do with the region as a whole. CARICOM is celebrating 50 years, and we're seeing that taking place next month, where Trinidad and Tobago is actually playing a large role in terms of the celebrations with respect to that 50th anniversary. And of course, we know the Treaty of Chaguaramas and so forth, so it bears a great significance. But the young person, the average young person, may not be as accurate about CARICOM, and I believe that for the future generations, a lack of interest, a lack of understanding, a lack of appeal when it comes to young people for CARICOM can be very disastrous for our economies moving forward, integration, and how as a region we move to the next level. I just really wanted to get your thoughts in terms of what are we doing wrong, or what can we do better, as a matter of fact, in terms of that engagement of citizens when it comes to regional bodies, because it has this economic relevance, but also this social and cultural relevance.
You know, it's a loaded question, Nikolai, but one that I welcome given my daytime job, my full-time job. I think you're correct. I think we really have not had a very deep conversation across all levels on issues related to CARICOM. I suspect by the time the celebrations come around, it would probably be during the school holidays. So I don't know what, if anything, is going to be done at the level of the education system in terms of ensuring that our younger persons, our primary or secondary school students, are involved, are engaged, have a sense of understanding. And one of the reasons I feel strongly about this is, again, coming back to the whole question of sustainable development. In 5, 10, 15 years' time, our leaders, not just nationally, but our leaders regionally, will come from the Gen Ys and the Gen Zs, you know, those younger persons, the millennials, even the alpha generation. And what are we doing to ensure that there is a deep appreciation for Caribbean history, for Caribbean economics, for those issues that impact not simply Trinidad and Tobago, but those issues that impact the region? And I think it's an opportunity that should not be missed, because I think too much of our Caribbean history is unknown, and it is therefore lost. And there are many issues that impact on us across the region. We have conversations around migration, for example. We have conversations around the CARICOM single market and economy. What does that mean for a student who wants to study in Trinidad and Tobago, but that student might be based in Belize? We keep hearing anecdotal stories about what is happening in Haiti, but how many of us in the region actually appreciate what is happening to our Haitian brothers and sisters? How many of us appreciate what it means when Prime Minister Mia Mottley in Barbados proposes the Bridgetown Initiative? What does that mean for us in the region and in terms of climate change? What does it mean for us in the region when Vice President Kamala Harris comes to the Bahamas to have a meeting with CARICOM heads of government? And I think too many of these issues are not sufficiently aired or articulated or form part of our public education systems. And I fear that in the future that we're going to be starting essentially from a tabula rasa. So when we appoint persons to be future leaders, you know, what is the knowledge base, what is the institutional framework that they're going to be taking with them when they essentially receive the baton as leaders in the region? So I really think it's important, and I'm hoping that more information will be made available in the public domain about the Treaty of Chaguaramas, about its significance. I mean, if I were to say on the program now, 1 from 10 leaves note, I mean, I don't know how many of your listeners or your viewers will understand the significance of that in the context of Caribbean regional development.
Now, the restriction of time on our interviews and our discussions, I mean, it's so annoying, but it leaves room for future conversations, of course. I want to say thank you so much for joining me this morning and unpacking a lot of those topics that we've spoken to this morning. I had many follow-up questions, but unfortunately, I know that we have to leave it there. Dr. Atz, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Most welcome. Have a wonderful day and a good weekend. And happy Father's Day to the fathers out there.
Indeed. That was Dr. Marlene Atz, and she is a development economist and a consultant. Folks, we're going to take a break at this point. When we come back, we have more for you here on AM Prime. Stay with us.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you do in our country.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is it no pressure on Nicholas Paul?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Kenny Sports Center is having a Grandfather's Day sale. From now until Sunday 18th June, get an amazing 20% off everything. You heard right, 20% off everything in store. Get all your top brands like Adidas, New Balance, Kinetic and a lot more. Visit any of our branches today, Port of Spain, West Mall, Long Circular Mall, Trinity Mall and Carlton Center San Fernando for this amazing 20% off sale. Happy Father's Day from Kenny Sports Center, where dads are appreciated. FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
The best birthday gifts are at thebesttoys.com. Shop for the best brands you love at the best prices. Like VTech, Leapfrog, Fisher-Price, Play-Doh, Hot Wheels, Barbie, Cocomelon, LOL, Baby Alive, Crayola. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship McBean. Shop online now at thebesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 32DBEST to order. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers?
Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best. I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in-depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WASN,
the content capital.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
As Kevin Hart would say, damn!
why we have so much minors out on the streets. There's an after-school program happening there.
Side women, don't give up. You know, you can become queen one day.
Those companies who are currently looking for their money that they deposited in the Silicon Valley Bank, it's not there. ChatGPT is basically the start of Terminator. Our relationship with the colonial powers is like a relationship with a little bit of abuse that people like to stay in. And we remember how that was. Put in $100 and later tonight, you'll get back 3,000. I promise you. I promise you not. Did you rent an accent while you were across there?
When you're in the proximity of Donald Trump, somehow you adopt his aura.
First of all, I thought the $200 would be more than enough. It's $200.
As a goat farmer, 3 goats. Yeah, 3 goats and 1 cow. You know the name?
No, I don't.
Right, Messi, LeBron, and Cristiano Ronaldo. And the cow name, Haaland.
I love Trinidad and Tobago, you know.
We discuss gestational diabetes, a form of diabetes which develops in pregnant women. This medical condition can affect both the fetus and mother, but can be managed to ensure that you have a healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby.
From the first trimester, there's an increased risk of miscarriages, an increased risk of fetal abnormalities. So these are congenital. The baby could be born with an abnormality.
What's Up, Doc? Every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing, we are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
Welcome back, folks, to AM Prime. I'm Nikolai Edwards. We're now shifting gears a bit to a National Day of Prayer. Well, this is especially dedicated to the servicemen and women of Trinidad and Tobago, members of the Defense Force, those who are responsible for protecting this country. Well, some pastors and a number of churches are all coming together, and all are welcomed to join as they provide some level of protection for the men and women who serve this country. Well, that is scheduled to take place on Monday. That's Monday, the 19th of June, from 2 p.m. And that's, of course, the holiday Labor Day. And we have a video that I'm going to play. And when we come back after that video, we have two gentlemen who will be joining us via Zoom to discuss more of the National Day of Prayer.
We invite you to our 7th National Day of Prayer as we stand in the gap for the protective services of our nation, Trinidad and Tobago. Join us on Monday, June 19 from 2 p.m. at Whitford Square in the city of Port of Spain as we stand in the gap and pray for our Commissioner of Police and police officers, for the Acting Commissioner of Prisons and the prison officers, for the Chief Fire Officer and firemen, for the Air Marshal, Defense Force, Coast Guard, and the Air Guard, declaring, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord." Psalm 33:12. It is our 7th National Day of Prayer, Monday, June 19th, 2 p.m., Woodford Square, Port of Spain. See you there.
Now joining us via Zoom, we have Pastor Carl Mead of World Outreach Ministries and Dr. Victor Jogi of End Time Harvest Ministries. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome to AM Prime.
Morning. Good morning, sir.
Now, we saw that video there advertising this day, and there's also a flyer. Now, on the flyer, it says, "Stand in the gap, Trinidad and Tobago, praying for the protective services of our nation." Now, this is expected to be attended by leaders of the protective services, and it's the 7th National Day of Prayer. Tell us a bit more about even that journey from the first National Day of Prayer to present, because one would wonder, is this movement to pray for the country growing in terms of numbers? Because now more than ever, we need as many people praying, as many hands on deck, and so forth. So just give us a bit of a journey to where we are now, Pastor Mead.
Well, no, Victor Jogi is the person that have an initial drive. He's the one with the brain. He has the brain, the brain drive. I'm the person to push him.
Understood.
Thank you very much, I'm Pastor Carl. And again, good morning to Trinidad and Tobago, and thank you, Nikolai, for having us on this morning. Yes. And WESN. Again, this journey started, of course, last June the 20th, on Labor Day. Mm-hmm. God spoke to me and told me to do 12 national meetings for our country, 12 national prayer meetings. And so it is going to be a three-year program. So we started on June the 20th, 2022. And of course, we already had 6 national prayer meetings. And of course, each prayer meeting has different specifics that we pray for. Mm-hmm. This particular prayer meeting is 7th, and I'm glad you said it's 7th National Day of Prayer. And you asked a very good question, because certainly it was a journey when we started praying for our pastors, praying for our nation, praying for unity of the body of Christ, praying for those who are hurting, praying for crime victims. There are so many different areas that we would have prayed for, praying for the economy of our country, praying for government ministers, praying for the leader of opposition. We have touched so many areas, praying for the first responders. So every prayer meeting takes on an initiative of itself. Mm-hmm. And so this particular prayer meeting, God said to me, let's pray for the protective services, because we see what happened, of course, a couple of months ago with our Commissioner of Police, when she made a statement that we need an intervention from God. We understand that she is, of course, she is the head chief, mm-hmm. and we understand that the police have their work to do. And I am no criminologist, I am no police strategist, but I am a priest. We stand in the gap for our nation. So this particular prayer, God said, come out and pray for our protective services. They have been protecting us. Yeah. They have been protecting the borders as much as they could do. And sometimes we criticize them and we blame them. But God said, let's pray for them. Let's bless them. Let's protect their families, because they also face challenges, disasters, emotions. And so this, of course, is where we are. We started, of course, a journey in June 2022. And here we are today, looking forward to June 19th, Woodford Square in the city of Port of Spain for our 7th National Day of Prayer.
Nice. And Pastor Mead, now, as you said, you're the one pushing this, and I'm sure that you're getting feedback because the more of these days that you all are having, the National Days of Prayer, I would imagine you are seeking to cover as many different sectors, our different leaders in different areas, whether the business sector, politicians, and so forth. Has there been that kind of reception that you would have imagined or envisioned when you all started off on this journey?
Well, my assignment here is to try to get the media involved around the whole nation. We have been on several
TV station, radio station. And I must commend those who have give us free coverage like your station. I must commend the station for trying to the best to push it the best we can. And my assignment is to try to get Woodford Square full of people to come and pray. Not just Christian people alone, but all who are hurting, all those who understand the vision for our country. Because right now, crime, it seems like it is taking a runaway in our country. And the commissioner of police has, she summoned the church, and we have heard the call. But when she summoned the church, Dr. Victor Jogi already had the voice of God in his head and was moving from a year ago. And God told me to walk with him, hold his hand, and to assist him the best way I can. But this one is the first one we will have in the open. All the 6 before was in the church buildings and so on. But now his desire is to put in the open. And we want people to come out and join us, because we want because prayer, everything starts with prayer and everything ends with prayer. When you're born, the prayer in, the dedicated the baby. When they're dead, they're buried in a coffin. Between birth and death, there's life. And in life, there's all kind of calamities. And we want to try our best to invite God in this nation in a supernatural way. Although he is here, we want God to be a part of this nation. And we want our cry on the 19th in Woodford Square at 2 o'clock to summons God in to get results. I believe, and Dr. Judy believe, there will be results in this prayer. That is why he took it outside in the open. And we must commend the Commissioner of Prisons, the Fire Department, all those who tune in. And Dr. Jogi has put together a budget. No one helped us. He is the one put together a budget. And he has dipped in his pocket, him and his wife and everything, to do this, and we have no financial input from the outside because we have the country at our heart. So my assignment is to get a Woodford Square, people that come out. That's why your program is involved. Also, Louis Singh, he has true interest. And we want to make sure all is welcome on the 19th at Woodford Square.
Excellent. And as you say, your assignment is, of course, filling Woodford Square. Dr. Jogi, what can persons look forward to when they actually come to Woodford Square in terms of whether the setup, we know it's a start time of 2 p.m. And if you can just put in our minds what we can expect when persons come out there and join.
You're asking great questions this morning, and I have the answer, of course. Thanks, Nikolai. Again, we have the Trinidad and Tobago Police Band that will be there and worship team. So we're going to have those. They're participating. I'm excited. And also we have the Trinidad and Tobago Police Intercessors. So not only the police will be playing music and worshiping with their worship team, they are also sending their intercessors who are going to be praying for our country. I'm so excited. And then we have the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Services. They also have their band. They are coming to worship with their worship team. And again, they are coming to pray. So they are intercessors too. We are looking forward to, these men and women of God who put their lives at risk for our nation, for us. They are coming out to play instruments. They are coming out to sing. They are coming out to worship. They are coming out to pray. In other words, we are all lifting up our hands together. So we expect a great move of God. We have many national organizations in this country, national elders who are supporting us, big organizations. And of course, we have the independent churches. So we are all in this together. This is not Victor Jogi's vision anymore. This is our vision. We have bought into this vision because our crime plan is prayer. Our crime plan is prayer. We are no criminologists. We can tell the police or the defense force what to do. They have their training. But our training is as a priest, we are standing in a gap for our nation. We see what is happening here in our country. We know the pain, so we are going to be crying out to God. We can see ourselves kneeling down Woodford Square, which is the People's Parliament, kneeling on the grass, lifting our hands to them and crying, oh God, help our people. Oh God, help our nation. Oh God, deliver us out of what we are facing right now, destruction. Oh God, remove judgment upon this nation. Again, prayer, worship, we're going to be having all of this, and certainly we are looking forward to all people coming out and standing in the gap Your nation is crying out. Your nation wants help. And we need to see people come out on Woodford Square, 2 p.m., Monday the 19th of June, to join with us. There's going to be a great time of worship and a great time of prayer.
And now my final question, because unfortunately time is escaping us. I saw on the flyer, it says all churches, all ministries, all of Trinidad and Tobago is welcome. Of course, if persons want to get in contact with you all prior to Monday, let's say they want to contribute something, they want to add further value to the program come Monday, how can they get in contact with you?
Okay, they can call me at 743-8298. That's 743-8298. Once they reach me, of course, and they can get me 24/7. Whatever assistance they want to bring to us. In fact, we are saying to them, if you want to sow into this vision, if you want to sow or give to God, then feel free to help us, because this is our 7th National Day of Prayer. We still have 8, 9, 10, and 11, and 12, which will take place this year, and 2 major prayer meetings in 2024. Thank you, my dear friend, for giving us this time this morning. Thank you, Reverend Carl Mead, for being the person who has been pushing this thing. Certainly, he is a blessing to this country and a blessing to me.
Thank you both gentlemen for joining me, Pastor Carl Mead of World Outreach Ministries and Dr. Victor Jogi, pastor at End Time Harvest Ministries. And I wish you every success come Monday, because this country really and truly needs the effort of all, especially our religious leaders, coming forward and seeking the blessing for this nation. So thank you so much for helping unpack and share that information with us.
I hope to see you there as well.
Yeah, why not? Thank you, gentlemen. Folks, and with that, we are going to take a commercial break. When we come back on the other side of 7, we still have more in store for you here on AM Prime. We'll be right back.
Here's the WESN News on the Hour. I'm Sarah Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley praised over the country's COVID-19 management. Bandit killed by police following a bar robbery in Valsayn. Regionally, Belizeans warned against purchasing counterfeit medicine. And internationally, Twitter sued by music publishers for $250 million. Now for the details. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley and World Health Organization Director General held bilateral talks at the Diplomatic Center, St. Anne's, on Thursday, 15th June 2023. Dr. Rowley was given heavy praises from the World Health Organization Director General for his handling of matters during the COVID-19 pandemic. Just over a month ago, the WHO had declared that COVID was no longer a global health emergency. Dr. Gabriel Jesus said this morning that although this is indeed so, the virus is still present, so there is need for vigilance. He maintained the need for readiness for any other pandemic going forward. A suspected bandit was shot and killed by police in Valsayn. Around 9:30 p.m., 2 armed men entered Roy's Sports Bar at the corner of Bassey Street and Southern Main Road, Spring Village, Valsayn, on Wednesday and announced a hold-up. They then proceeded to rob the proprietor and several customers of cash, and then grabbed a quantity of alcohol and cigarettes. However, on exiting the bar, the bandits were greeted by responding officers and a shootout ensued. One suspect, identified only as Darkman, was hit while the other ran off, but was later found hiding in a bathroom. Darkman died on arrival at the Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex. Regionally, Belizeans have been warned to be wary about retail outlets that could be selling counterfeit Sudogrip. The Ministry of Health and Wellness in Belize, via a statement, said during routine surveillance activities, counterfeit Sudagrip was seized at a retail outlet in the Stan Creek district. The medicine was immediately seized by authorities. The ministry started an investigation and removal of all products found countrywide. The ministry is now advising citizens of Belize to avoid the purchase and consumption of the counterfeit medicine. They are also advising citizens to report to the Ministry of Health and Wellness if they suspect the counterfeit item being sold. Internationally, a group of 17 music publishers in the U.S. has sued Twitter, claiming the platform enabled copyright violations involving nearly 1,700 songs. The National Music Publishers Association is seeking more than $250 million in damages. In a lawsuit filed at the Federal District Court in Nashville, the NMPA claimed Twitter permits and encourages infringement for profit. It says the situation has not improved since Elon Musk bought the company. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I am Sierra Ali. Thanks for watching.
Hi friends, we want to invite you to our 7th National Day of Prayer as we stand in the gap for the protective services of our nation, Trinidad and Tobago. Join us on Monday, June the 19th from 2 p.m. at the Woodford Square in the city of Port of Spain as we stand in the gap and pray for our Commissioner of Police and police officers, for the Acting Commissioner of Prisons and prison officers, for the Chief Fire Officer and firemen, for the Air Marshal, Defense Force, Coast Guard, and Air Guard, declaring, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord," Psalm 32:12. It is our 7th National Day of Prayer, Monday, June the 19th, 2 p.m., Woodford Square, Port of Spain. See you there.
Preserving Belmont heritage and building community. And St. Francis of Assisi Church, Belmont present an Enchanted Evening 3 on Sunday, June 18th, 2023 at the Academy of the Performing Arts, Napa, Lord Kitchener Auditorium from 7 p.m. featuring incredible performances by QED, Raymond Edwards, Eddie Cumberbatch, and Nigel Floyd, the National Steel Symphony Orchestra, Chrison Joseph, Hermina Charles, Nigel Rojas, Rayon Elbon, the Shift Shakti Dance Group, and other distinguished artists. Tickets available for $250, $300, or $400 at Napa Box Office, or call the ticket hotlines at 797-9884 or 799-3306. Support the St. Francis Restoration, an Enchanted Evening 3.
Welcome back to AM Prime. I'm Nikolai Edwards. We are now going to take a look at some regional stories that have been taking place throughout the region and that we should be focusing some attention on. And we go to Cuba, where at least one person is dead and thousands evacuated as floods strike Cuba. Now, NBC News' Guad Vinegas reports on the record rainfall that has destroyed homes and critical crops.
A flooding emergency in Cuba turns deadly. Raging water sweeping through homes, leaving communities underwater, thousands evacuated, and at least one person killed. The military using helicopters in some areas to rescue families, including women and children. They warned us before, but we didn't want to leave, and now we had to get out, said this man after he boarded one of the military helicopters. Others, like this elderly couple, rescued on boats from their homes. Cuba's central and eastern areas are the most affected after a weekend of heavy rain causing rivers to overflow. Over 400 rural communities affected by the flooding. We're trying to save everything we can while helping neighbors, said this man. Official media reporting some 10,000 homes have been damaged. and more than 7,000 people have been evacuated. Days of rain have left the ground saturated with water, with dams at capacity, and the forecast indicating more rain may come in a country where the needs are overwhelming.
Lack of food, lack of medicine, lack of gasoline, which affects aid to any part of the country right now.
The flooding already damaging over 2,000 acres of crops, including fruits and vegetables, vital to help with those food shortages.
Add a disaster such as flooding or hurricanes, and it becomes almost unbearable for the Cuban people right now.
Many bracing for another tough year with a new hurricane season just beginning. Guad Venegas, NBC News.
And we now shift focus to another Caribbean island, this time Barbados, where the Director of Trustees and the founder of Trident Charity, Quincy Jones, said they will assist young people emotionally, financially, and spiritually in order to boost the productivity and growth of the country. This includes the establishment of crime prevention and personal development programs. More in this video.
The newly appointed president of the World Bank, Ajay Banga, says the entity is looking at opportunities to strengthen its relationship with Jamaica. Speaking to journalists at a site visit in Manchester, Mr. Banga says preliminary discussions have started. Javon Keys was there.
Just 12 days on the job and the newly minted president of the World Bank, Ajay Banga, is in Jamaica. It's historic as it's the first World Bank president to visit the country in an official capacity in the 60-year history of relations between Jamaica and the multilateral agency. His visit is part of his Global Impact Tour happening between now and December 2023. The World Bank president is in Jamaica as a part of strategic tours looking at how various stakeholders within the World Bank Group are being engaged. Now, during his tour here, he's made his way to Williamsfield in Manchester to engage with a few farmers in a program that has been supported by the World Bank. But additionally, the World Bank president says he's been engaged in discussions with members of government about some key strategic partnerships. Preliminary talks started on Tuesday with Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clark.
The most important thing that came out to me was development in people, investing in people, education. What he means by education obviously is primary education, early stages, but also at the right time, the right kind of skilling for people that makes sense with the job opportunities that should come up in Jamaica. I found that to be sensible and practical, makes sense to me. Second thing we talked about was digitization, and how we have to work on digitizing not the population only, but also the government itself, so that citizens can see more transparency in government, ministers can drive their departments better, so that everybody benefits.
He says electricity and climate resilience were other areas discussed.
Electricity at an affordable price is the starting point of development. So he's very focused on that. And he's very focused on using public-private partnerships so that he runs the country with macro fiscal prudence, but at the same time brings a great deal of resources to bear on the real problems that he thinks that Jamaica needs to talk about. Final item, climate resilience. All of these countries are in places where one hurricane can damage your GDP in double digits. And everything we see today changes in 3 hours.
He says as the World Bank continues to advance global development to include support for various projects and more partnerships with the private sector, he hopes to continue discussions towards helping various countries, including small island developing states like Jamaica, advance the global development goals. Javon Keys, TVJ News.
The newly appointed president of the World Bank, Ajay Banga, said
to the World Bank leader coming to Jamaica. We're now actually going to jump over to that clip from Barbados as promised.
Over the past couple of months, the Trident Charity has focused on 2 big projects. The first project is in community development in terms of job creation, where we had a sensitization for over 100 young persons applying for a job. Out of that, we did interviews, and that interviews was a long process at night, from 6 o'clock until midnight, where we had different panels coming on board with the interview process. And out of that, we chose 77 young people, And then we shortlist that 77 to 55 young persons. So far, we only have received jobs for 25 of these 55 persons so far, which is still half. And we are very thankful for those who have received jobs so far. We still have a little bit more road to go in terms of making sure the other young persons receive the jobs. But so far, the talent that exists among these young people are gifted. Young people just want the opportunity to give back. And out of our job creation, we also pick ambassadors because we recognize that young people are not just, they are leaders, and we have to give young people this the opportunity to lead. So because of that, we give them the opportunity to be now an expression of not just charity, but of themselves, and they're role models of themselves. So I'd like to thank all 55 young persons for coming on board with Trade Charities, and then we give them our applause. Yesterday was a glimpse of what we have done. They have received jobs in sales, they have received jobs in office assistant. Someone have actually received a job in supervisory position. Some come with bachelor's, some come with associate degrees, some don't even come with CXCs at all. But we were able to still provide jobs for them. And I'd like to thank Corporate Barbados for really coming on board for providing jobs. And we will still hope that we still provide jobs for all 55 persons. It's still a little road ahead, and we will still make it. We will give everybody that chance. Also, too, we did our legal aid clinic in March, where we look at the world of work. And out of that, we had over 100 participants every night on Wednesdays for the whole entire month of March, going to this workshop, looking at the world of work. And we look at the different laws in terms of the land that was presented by Verla de Pisa and Mr. Anthony Francis World, both attorneys at law. And they look at the Employment Rights Act, and they look at the Shaw Act and the Safety Act. And it was very interesting because young people didn't even know, one of the questions they asked is about money. You know how young people ask the question about money in terms of vacation pay and when they're supposed to get paid double time. But you only get paid double time once it's a Christian holiday. So they thought that because every holiday is double time, but it's not so. It only applies to Christmas Day and not like Arabaro Day. So I think it was a very interesting experience because young people were exposed to the world of work in the legal aspect. And next we're going to be getting ready for next month for another legal aid clinic online, but this time we're doing it both online and hybrid in terms of face-to-face. And the question is, should I say I do? And we're looking at the divorce because we recognize that divorce now is becoming an issue. We love you right down to the aisle, and we love you at home, and then they get home and there's something totally different. And then you want a divorce, but the problem is you have children involved, or you have estate involved, or you're still paying for a divorce. So then the question is, how do you make sure that at the end of the day that you come out of that divorce and move on your lives in a very clean manner? And that's going to be very interesting in terms of the next legal advice in terms of our legal aid clinics.
Now, according to Transformation's CANE network, conversations about mental health are constantly stigmatized, and there can be a lot of shame or judgment around struggling with mental illnesses. This is especially true when it comes to discussing masculinity and mental health, as toxic masculinity can make it difficult or even impossible for men to come forward about their mental health problems. If you haven't heard before, June is Men's Mental Health Month. It really shines a light or brings awareness to the issue of men's mental health. And when you think about it, not enough had been done prior to, let's say, now, and onward efforts about men's mental health, prioritizing that issue, resourcing support as it relates to that, and really just changing how we view men's mental health. Now, to help me unpack to that, we have joining us via Zoom Sule Joseph. He's a psychologist, and he's also the host of WESN's show Site. Sule, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Now, we are talking about the issue of men's mental health, and we're both men, And this is something that even on a personal level, I'm sure that we may have things that we can relate to. And the fact is that many other men do have some of the same issues and so forth and can relate. But the problem is that the conversation isn't happening as it ought to. I listed out because of the stigma that is involved in there. Are you seeing it from only that perspective, or are there other reasons that we as men find it very difficult to have those conversations?
Ooh, all right. So that's a lot to unpack.
Yes.
That's a lot to unpack there. First, I kind of want to establish that everybody would have at some point have some mental health struggles if we understand what mental health is. And if you look at physical health, and you can say sometimes you're not physically healthy, then you can imagine that sometimes you'll have any and everybody could not be mentally unhealthy sometimes or at some point. All right, it's a scale, as I usually like to say. Now, having said that, you have a number of factors, right? A number of factors that contribute to men perhaps not necessarily being diagnosed correctly with mental health issues, or at least not feeling comfortable to even go to be diagnosed in the first place. And a lot of that comes out of some of the socialization of men, the culture, the practice of most men not wanting to go to the doctor, socialization where we were taught, even as children, to shake things off. So whereas girl children may have been fostered, cared for, if they were going through an incident, perhaps if they were crying or they felt emotionally that they were struggling. Particularly, let's say the Caribbean, for example. I want to use Trinidad as a perfect example. Oftentimes for men, what you would find instead is a culture of trying to toughen them up. To get men to practice being able to shrug off emotional issues. And so when you get older, that's the practice. The practice is not to accept whatever emotional issue or turmoil you might be going through, but instead to try to shrug it off. Yes. And of course, we know those, just shrugging those things off can, of course, often lead to issues of mental health.
And we know that when we think about mental health, whether with males or females, the issue of suicide arises. And according to reports in the United States, for instance, men are 4 times more likely to commit suicide than women. But you would have women who would be more than likely to access the kind of care necessary for them to not just cope, but to solve many of the problems that they grapple with. Bringing that down to Trinidad and Tobago and practicing as long as you have, or at least seeing clients that you do, and just as a normal citizen, have you noticed any changes in terms of that information, men less than likely going to seek out help or having those difficult conversations? Are you seeing any changes at all?
Statistically, to give you a definitive response statistically is difficult. We don't really have quick and easy access to local statistics on unfortunately on those type of issues.
Sure.
However, what I can say is that I have, if I use the eye test or at least the experience, that I've noticed a gradual shifting away from, or the destigmatization of men being able to seek mental health actually is now being encouraged. And for the men who don't feel comfortable because of, again, socialization and perhaps how they were raised, who don't feel comfortable being a bit demonized or characterized as this term that I don't agree with, being toxic masculine. Yeah? So we find that, so yes, there's been a gradual shift towards men accessing assistance, mental health assistance, but you still have a culture to combat where a lot of men were socialized in thinking a real man can handle their own problems, right? And it somehow makes you less of a man to see a therapist and request help. So I would imagine that the statistics would be showing an improvement, I suppose, in men seeking assistance.
And I'm glad that at least from an observational standpoint, you can agree that there are changes, because I can even relate to where I feel as though now more than before, my male friends, we are able to have those kinds of conversations in a very comfortable way about things that are affecting them, issues of depression and anxiety and so forth. Those are things that even when we look at top leadership around the world, you are seeing leaders who may not be as aggressive, male leaders who may not be as aggressive in their approach. And many a times that has a trickle-down effect where people feel it more okay to be in tune with their feelings, men especially. So if you see some kind of a tragic incident and you see a male leader, a strong male leader coming out and shedding a tear, that has a particular impact or effect. But what I want to jump to is even bringing that to a local context. We are hearing on the radio programs, discussions are taking place more widely, more broadly on issues that probably would not have had that kind of a public airing in the way that it is happening right now. Are you confident that we are heading in the right direction? And more so, do we have the resources necessary, let's say the clinical psychologists and so forth, available to help us along that journey?
To answer quickly, yes, I do think that we're heading in the right direction. If we're moving at a snail's pace, perhaps we are compared to the rest of the world, but we are moving in a positive direction. And by a basic eye test, I suppose, again, without statistics, you can kind of see where the culture has evolved to male children, at least, being able to express themselves and say what they like and don't like and what bothers them emotionally, and a little bit being encouraged more to share those feelings. So that is trending upward quite well. So so I would say yes to that.
Yeah.
As to if we have the requisite resources, I can't necessarily answer that question. I will say that I know that our educational facilities are churning out a lot of persons in the behavioral sciences field and social services field, so a lot of social workers, a lot of psychologists, behavioral specialists, and so on. As to what else the resources, whether we have all of them, I really can't speak specifically to that end. But what I will say is that we still need to see better trending for accessibility for counseling and so on for everybody.
Yeah. Now,
the accessibility of it, I think, is
understood. And in terms of trending, using that word, we would have seen on social media, or at least I bear witness to, where there are discussions taking place, whether on Twitter or other spaces, when we look at the kind of content being produced or made available, there is that rhetoric of the feminization of men. When men are allowed the certain freedoms to express themselves in particular ways, you see those of a particular school of thought coming forward and using that term, the feminization of men. How impactful is that rhetoric on this whole effort to secure men's mental health and to really treat with that issue of cultural or heritage practices that men have more or less fallen victim to?
Yeah, the client come up with some hard-hitting questions today. I won't knock it. I won't knock it. And for the sake of this conversation, let's call them purists or traditionalists, right? And persons who feel as though the traditionalism of masculinity is under attack and needs to be defended. Persons like Andrew Tate had put it perhaps in a category like that. And there may be aspects of his rhetoric that don't resonate well with some people, but there are also aspects of his rhetoric or his beliefs that resonate quite well with a lot of men, actually, and women, surprisingly, as well. And I put that in the category of traditionalists, of persons who want to stick to what they believe is the traditional values of what a man is supposed to be and what a man is supposed to bring to the table and so on. I won't say perhaps in some aspects it can hurt, but in some aspects it can also assist. So it's hard to judge that. But I will say that to answer that your question, that it is impactful. Of course it is impactful. It's impactful because it I suppose helps regulate, for lack of a better word, it will help regulate how we move forward in seeing masculinity and the roles of men and so on as we move forward. Because whether we like it or not, I don't see where at any point men and women blurring the line of, like totally blurring that line of everybody being on board and accepting that it does not make a difference. A man and a woman would not make a difference. So for example, I'm not sure if you'll ever get to the point where Olympics will have a race where men 100 meters where it doesn't matter. There's no female races or male races. There's just human races. I don't know if you get to that point, right? And so traditionalists will continue to argue among that line, and purists, if you want to call them that. And so yes, I think they will continue to majorly impact men and how we see men, and of course, by extension, men's mental health.
Understood. And ironically enough, that's something that I think about quite often. Seeing mixed football teams, mixed basketball teams, it's very interesting. And I do think at one point or another we will experiment with that, but it does seem very far off at this point. We have just about 1 minute, and what I wanted to find out, because we have Father's Day coming up this weekend, and there usually is a lot more emphasis being placed on Mother's Day as opposed to Father's Day. And people see that as, a competition of sorts, and wonder why men are not getting necessarily more attention and so forth. Discussions such as that, do you think that they are healthy within this quest to really treat with men's issues? Because we could even look at it through the lens of the persons who would say that they are feminists, and that whole conversation about feminism really is about just putting a light on women and talking men. But we know that that is not the case. As it relates to Mother's Day, Father's Day, comparing and stuff, is that a healthy conversation that's taking place?
Well, I can only speak for me in this instance, and I believe it is. Any discussion or discourse where we are trying to answer questions, because the fact that we're having the conversation is because some persons are asking questions, and so it resonates, or it's bothering us a cross section. And any conversation that we can have that is open and respectful, that helps ease the stresses or concerns of our population, to me, could only be a good thing. Because we have when we talk about parental alienation, and I know you didn't ask me that, but that's one of the major issues that men tend to suffer with. Parental alienation, which is when they have separated or parents no longer on good speaking terms, perhaps the mother utilizing the children or keeping children away from the father to punish them, right? Or to alienate the father for whatever reason, alienate the father from the children. And usually those type of issues cause men issues with depression and mental health and so on, right? Besides work, that's one of the other major things that affect men. And we don't necessarily have those conversations. So for the things that we do have the conversations about, I'm hoping that that spills over into other major male issues. Yeah, we don't. This is Men's Mental Health Month. When we have Women's Mental Health Month, it's a big thing. When we talk about breast cancer and so on, that's a big thing. Prostate cancer is not so much a big conversation, because I still think we try to maybe overcompensate for the lack of consideration for women, perhaps over the years, and so in so doing, we need to ask the question: are we undercompensating, or perhaps even now ignoring men and allowing men to treat with these issues themselves? So we're asking men to progress mentally and to continue progressing, but as a society, are we supporting them in that?
Definitely important conversations, but unfortunately time has run out. And I do hope that people continue these kinds of conversations in the different spaces and places, because that's the only way that we're going to move to a much better place where we see equality, where we see equity, and we see people getting the kind of care and attention necessary. Sule, let me thank you so much for joining me this morning to help unpack Men's Mental Health Month, which is June, and we even spoke a bit about Father's Day, but thank you for joining me.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
And that was Dr. Sule Joseph, a psychologist and the host of WESN's show Site. Well, folks, that's how we leave it this morning here on AM Prime. To all the fathers, I want to say to you, a happy Father's Day coming up. And let it really be a time to reflect and to see, as a society, as individuals and so forth, are we really doing enough to support men's mental health? And ask ourselves, what more can we do to improve on that? Folks, have a productive day, and I will see you next week here on AM Prime WESN. Have a great day.
WESN.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers?
Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best.
I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the content capital.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing now, Andy.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Site, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
They will achieve. I think it's important to underline that this is an important initiative based on the goodwill of a number of meaningful countries.
Demands could include pulling back Russian troops, removing tactical nuclear weapons from Belarus, suspending the ICC arrest warrant for Putin, and sanction relief. For Africa, the fallout of the war has been particularly hard, with disrupted grain supplies leading to high inflation and hunger. The pressure has been lifted somewhat by the Black Sea grain deal, but Putin has once again threatened that Russia could pull out, something Africa's leaders hope these talks can avoid.
Of course, I hope that in the conversations between President Putin and the African leaders, there is a positive outcome in relation to the Black Sea Initiative, as well as in relation to the efforts that we are making for the exports of Russian food and fertilizers.
The latest peace effort is one of several competing initiatives, but it could yet prove significant. Africa finds itself at the center of a tug-of-war between East and West, with both Kyiv and the Kremlin courting the continent for diplomatic influence since the Russian invasion began.
Well, for more, we can speak to our foreign editor, Angela Diffley. Hello to you, Angela. Tell us a little bit more about what this meeting is all about.
Any peace initiative is welcome. One might wonder, though, why the Africans are taking an interest in this. It is having a huge impact on many African countries, this war between Russia and Ukraine, because of grain, of course. Much of the grain which Ukraine normally exports has been blocked. There is an accord at the moment, but Russia threatens regularly that it will pull out of the accord. The accord allows for some of that grain to cross the Black Sea and end up in very many places, including Africa. The other reason, Africa is very dependent on Russian fertilizer. Ukraine is, they're hoping they might be able to get Ukraine to ease restrictions on the export of that Russian fertilizer. Both of those two things, many African countries are highly dependent on those. So this war is having a significant impact in Africa. This delegation, one of the key movers and shakers behind it is the South African President, Cyril Ramaphosa. And there is a theory that perhaps he's trying to reposition himself after criticism from Washington. This delegation is supposed to look non-aligned and neutral. And South Africa was forced to deny recently allegations from Washington that it was shipping arms to Russia. There's an investigation underway in South Africa over that, but it's possible that Ramaphosa is keen to position himself and South Africa as a neutral country, not leaning too much towards Russia. And that, of course, is because Washington has let it be known that it might reconsider the beneficial trade arrangements preferential to South Africa that are currently in place if South Africa chooses to be on Russia's side. South Africa has no obligation, of course, to be on the West's side, but there might be repercussions from Washington. The other reason, of course, is simply that African countries regularly say we would like a bigger voice in world affairs, a bigger voice at the United Nations. Here is an opportunity for them. They don't really have a stake in this war on either side. And so if they can bring about peace, then that would be welcomed by everyone.
And what might this delegation accomplish?
It will have very limited objectives at this stage. There is no question of peace right now. The idea is to get some sort of talking going, to have dialogue, perhaps on the grain deal, as we've said, the fertilizer arrangements, as we've said, prisoner swaps, perhaps, and perhaps encouraging Ukraine and other countries, perhaps encouraging the UN to lift the international warrant on Vladimir Putin, the ICC warrant on Vladimir Putin. Those might be the sorts of things. It's unclear how much this delegation could achieve. It has very limited leverage. None of these countries have much leverage. Worth pointing out that of the 7 countries, South Africa was seen to be leaning a little bit towards Russia, as was Uganda, Zambia and the Comoros, slightly more west-leaning, and the 3 other countries on our map there seen as more neutral. So it's a very balanced delegation, however you look at it. The timing, of course, is not propitious. As they arrive, missiles, drones on Kyiv. They are getting a taste of what Ukraine is experiencing every single day. And this is not a time when either side is interested in peace. So they're looking much further down the road.
All right, Angela, thank you very much. Angela Diffley, France 24's foreign editor. In Greece, 9 suspected human traffickers are facing a court after Wednesday's shipwreck left dozens of people dead. Public prosecutor already pressing for several charges. The vessel was reportedly carrying nearly 750 people from Libya to Italy. At least 78 bodies have been found, but some fear the final death toll could be in the hundreds. Antonio Kerrigan has more.
Charged with human trafficking, these men are among the 9 arrested in Kalamata, according to Greek media. Among them was the captain, who jumped ship before it sank. As time goes by since Wednesday's shipwreck, the hope of finding more survivors is dwindling, but family members anxiously await good news. Kassam Abouzid lives in Germany and flew to Greece as his wife and brother-in-law are among those who paid $4.5 thousand to reach Europe on the decrepit fishing trawler. Both are unaccounted for.
We didn't get approval for my wife's asylum application to Germany, where I work. The application got delayed, and we didn't get approval.
All survivors so far have been men, and with the number of passengers unknown, fears are growing that hundreds of women and children may have been in the hull. The shipwreck occurred in one of the deepest areas of the Mediterranean Sea, complicating search and rescue efforts. The true death toll may never be known. Greek coast guards have been escorting the overcrowded ship for several hours and say the vessel declined repeated offers of help, while one network of activists said migrants on board had in fact called for help. UNHCR are calling for answers.
What people have said or may have said to the Hellenic Coast Guard, that boat should not have continued its daily journey. But that's something that we have seen over recent months as coastal states challenge the notion of distress, with the hope that the boat will continue its journey to reach the Italian search and rescue area of operation.
Protesters set fire to the EU flag in Athens on Thursday over immigration policy. This as more than 20,000 have died or disappeared crossing the central Mediterranean since 2014.
9 months ago, a 22-year-old Kurdish woman, Mahsa Amini, died in the custody of Iran's morality police. Her death sparked a protest movement which later morphed into a broader condemnation of Iran's rulers. It became the regime's biggest threat to power in 4 decades. Authorities responded with a brutal, deadly crackdown. Clemens Waller has more.
Tehran, September 16th, 2022. A young woman dies after being detained by the morality police for failing to wear her headscarf properly. Her name? Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian woman who would become the symbol of an unprecedented protest movement against the ruling regime. At the forefront of this revolt are the women who rally supporters under the banner Woman, Life, Freedom, and who defy the authorities every evening throughout the country by burning their veils and cutting their hair in public places. They were joined by students and Iran's ethnic minorities. The cleric-led regime claimed that Mahsa Amini had died of a heart attack. However, this video shows a young woman, presented as Amini in question, collapsing in front of a policewoman. Facing its biggest threat in over 4 decades in power, and after months of brutal repression, as a result, the regime created a climate of fear and protests became increasingly muted. The international community strongly condemned the authorities' repression, but did not impose sanctions against Tehran. According to NGOs, in 9 months, the demonstrations have resulted in more than 500 deaths and the arrest of tens of thousands of people. The Iranian authorities have also hanged at least 7 men, and many are still awaiting trial. This is the case of 2 Iranian journalists. Their crime, having revealed the death in custody of Mahsa Amini, they face the death penalty.
For more, I'm joined on the set by Paris-based journalist from the Express newspaper, Hamdan Mustafavi. Thank you very much for joining us here. 9 months on, have those flames of this protest movement all but been extinguished?
They have not been totally extinguished because there is a strong sense in Iran that things have changed beyond the point. deeply in the, particularly for the young population. Of course, you don't see the protests that we have seen just before. We don't see massive protests, but there are several acts of civil disobedience. There are women walking without the veil.